All right. So, in part two, the Dursleys have been noticing some strange things that have been going on, but Mr. Dursley is convinced that he is not involved. And we had just ran into a strange cat and a man named Albus Dumbledore. Let's keep going. Albus Dumbledore didn't seem to realize that he had just arrived in the street where everything from his name to his boots was unwelcome. He was busy rummaging in his cloak looking for something, but he did seem to realize that he was being watched. Because he looked up suddenly at the cat, which was staring at him from the other end of the street. For some reason, the sight of the cat seemed to amuse him. He chuckled and muttered, "I should have known." He found what he was looking for in his inside pocket. It seemed to be a silver cigarette lighter. He flicked it open and held it up into the air and clicked it. The nearest street lamp went out with a little pop. He clicked it again. The next lamp flickered into darkness. 12 times he clicked the putter outer until the lights left in the whole street were 2 tiny pinpricks in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat watching him. If anyone looked out the window now, even beady-eyed Mrs. Dursley, they wouldn't be able to see anything that was happening down on the pavement. Dumbledore slipped the putter outer inside his cloak and set off down the street towards number 4, where he sat down on the wall next to the cat. He didn't look at it, but after a moment he spoke to it. Fancy seeing you here, Professor McGonagall." He turned to smile at the tabby, but it had gone. Instead, he was smiling at a rather severe-looking woman who was wearing square glasses exactly the shape of the markings the cat had around its eyes. She, too, was wearing a cloak, an emerald one. Her black hair was drawn into a tight bun. She looked distinctly ruffled. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. "My dear Professor, I've never seen a cat sit so stiffly." "You'd be stiff, too, if you were sitting on a brick wall all day," said Professor McGonagall. "All day? When you could have been celebrating? I must have passed a dozen feasts and parties on my way here."
Good morning.
Professor McGonagall sniffed angrily. "Oh, yes, everyone's celebrating all right," she said impatiently. "You'd think they'd be a bit more careful, but no. Even the Muggles have noticed something going on. It was in their news." She jerked her head back at the Dursleys' dark living room. "I heard it. Flocks of owls shooting stars? Well, they're not going to be completely stupid. They were bound to notice something. Shooting stars down in Kent. I bet that was Dedulus Diggle. He never had much sense." "You can't blame them," said Dumbledore gently. "We've had precious little to celebrate for 11 years. "I know that," said Professor McGonagall irritably. "But there's no reason to lose our heads. People are being downright careless, out on the streets in broad daylight, not even dressed in Muggle clothes, swapping rumors." She threw a sharp sideways glance at Dumbledore here, as though hoping he was going to tell her something, but he did not. So she went on. "A fine thing it would be if, on the very day you-know-who seems to have disappeared at last, the Muggles found out all about us. I suppose he really is gone." "It certainly seems so," said Dumbledore. "We have much to be thankful for. Would you care for a sherbet lemon?" "A what?" "A sherbet lemon. They're kind of a Muggle sweet that I'm rather fond of." "No, thank you," said Professor McGonagall coldly, as though she didn't think this was the moment for a sherbet lemons. "As I say, even if you-know-who has gone." "My dear Professor, a surely sensible person like yourself can call him by his name. All this you-know-who nonsense. For 11 years I have been trying to persuade people to call him by his proper name, Voldemort." Professor McGonagall flinched, but Dumbledore, who was unsticking 2 sherbet lemons, seemed not to notice. "It all gets so confusing if we keep saying you-know-who. I have never seen any reason to be frightened of saying Voldemort's name." "I know you haven't," said Professor McGonagall, sounding half exasperated, half admiring. "But you're different. Everyone knows you're the only one that you-know-who. All right, Voldemort was frightened of." "You flatter me," said Dumbledore calmly. "Voldemort had powers I will never have." "Oh, that's only because, well, You're too noble to use them. It's lucky it's dark. I haven't blushed so much since Madame Pomfrey told me she liked my new earmuffs. Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore and said, "The owls are nothing to the rumors that are flying around. You know what everyone's saying? About why he's disappeared and what finally stopped him?" It seemed that Professor McGonagall had reached the point she was most anxious to discuss, the real reason she had been waiting on a cold, hard wall all day, for neither as a cat nor as a woman she had fixed Dumbledore with such a piercing stare as she did now. It was plain that whatever everyone was saying, she was not going to believe until Dumbledore told her it was true. Dumbledore, however, was choosing another sherbet lemon and did not answer. "What they're saying," she pressed on, "is that last night Voldemort turned up to Godric's Howl. He went to find the Potters. The rumor is that, well, that Lily and James Potter are dead." Dumbledore bowed his head. Professor McGonagall gasped. "Lily and James. I can't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Oh, Albus." Dumbledore reached out and patted her on the shoulder. "I know," he said heavily. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled as she went on. "That's not all. They're saying he tried to kill the Potter's son Harry, but he couldn't. He couldn't kill the little boy. Nobody knows why or how, but they're saying that when he couldn't kill Harry Potter, that Voldemort's powers somehow broke, and that's why he's gone." Dumbledore nodded glumly. "It's true?" faltered Professor McGonagall. "After all he's done, all the people he's killed, he couldn't kill a little boy? It's just astounding. Of all the things to stop him, but how in the name of heaven did Harry survive?" "We can only guess," said Dumbledore. "We may never know." Professor McGonagall pulled out a lace handkerchief and dabbed her eyes beneath her spectacles. Dumbledore gave a great sniff as he took a golden watch from his pocket and examined it. It was a very odd watch. It had 12 hands and no numbers. Instead, little planets were moving around the edge. It must have made sense to Dumbledore, though, because he put it back in his pocket and said, "Ugh, Hagrid's late. I suppose it was he who had told you I'd be here, then." "Yes," said Professor McGonagall, "and I don't suppose you're going to tell me why you're here, of all places." "I've come to bring Harry to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has now." All right, we'll stop there, and we will continue on the next video.